It was supposed to be a quiet night, the kind of night a detective dreams of. I had just poured myself a glass of whiskey, the amber liquid catching the dim light, when the phone rang. The call was short, sharp, and cut straight through the calm. A murder at the old Hensley Manor. Victim found in a locked room. No signs of forced entry. I felt that familiar pit in my stomach. Locked room murders. They're a special kind of hell. Crimes that defy logic, that whisper of the impossible. I grabbed my coat, the cold Boston rain hitting me like a slap in the face as I stepped outside. I didn't know it then, but what was waiting for me inside that mansion would chase me through my nightmares for years to come. The rain was relentless, pounding against the windows of my car as the Hensley Manor came into view. It wasn't a house. It was a beast, a Victorian monolith hunched against the stormy sky. Inside, the air was thick with tension. A maid, her face ashen and her hands shaking, led me up the grand staircase. And there he was, Arthur Hensley, a man known more for his cruelty than his wealth, sprawled dead on his study floor, a single, neat bullet hole in his forehead. The door had been locked from the inside, the windows bolted shut, no visible means of escape. I knelt beside the body. No weapon, no casings, no fingerprints, just the acrid smell of gunpowder and the faint, ghostly scent of cigar smoke hanging in the air. Downstairs, 3 figures waited in the heavy silence, their faces illuminated by a flickering lamp. Clara, the young, beautiful wife, Henry, the shrewd business partner, and Evelyn, the quiet stepdaughter. They all looked horrified, but in my line of work, you learn that shock can be an exquisite performance. I cut straight to it. Where were you all at 10:47? Clara was the first to speak, her voice a nervous stammer. I was reading in the lounge. Henry, cool and composed, replied, outside, making a business call. Evelyn just whispered, her eyes fixed on the floor. I was asleep. 3 people, 3 stories. And somewhere in the space between their words, a lie was taking root. I went back to the study. A crime scene is a story waiting to be read, and this one was a masterpiece of misdirection. I ran my hand along the window latches. They were caked in dust, untouched for years, all except for one. In the corner of the far window, I found a tiny, fresh scratch in the paint. Pulling back the heavy velvet curtain, a rush of cold air greeted me, and something small and dark fluttered to the floor. A single black feather. Strange. No bird that size lived in the city. My gaze drifted. By the bookshelf, a faint line of ash almost invisible against the dark wood. I knelt down, a burnt matchstick still carrying the sharp scent of sulfur. Someone hadn't just been in this room. They had lit something, or burned something. Just then, the coroner arrived, his face grim. Single shot, detective. Close range. Definitely not a suicide. I nodded, my mind racing. And the gun. He gestured towards the fireplace with a pair of tongs. Found it in the grate, he said, holding up a mangled piece of metal. A revolver, warped and blackened by the intense heat. Burned almost to nothing. My eyes narrowed. The killer had tried to destroy the evidence. But that raised the biggest question of all. How do you shoot someone, burn the gun, and then lock the door from the inside before vanishing into thin air? Unless you never left it through the door at all. Hours bled into one another. I sat alone in the dead man's chair, the fire crackling in the hearth, replaying the sequence of events in my mind. The argument, the gunshot, the ensuing silence. My eyes scanned the room, searching for the one detail had missed. And then I saw it, on the massive bookshelf, a single volume, The Art of Deception. It was pulled out just a fraction of an inch more than the others. On a hunch, I gave it a firm tug. Click. With a low groan, the entire bookshelf swung inwards, revealing a dark, narrow passage hidden in the wall. A secret corridor. I raised my flashlight, its beam cutting through the darkness, and my pulse quickened. The impossible had just become very, very possible. The passage was choked with the smell of dust and forgotten years. My flashlight beam danced across the floor, revealing footprints in the thick grime. Not one set, but three. One large, clearly a man's shoe. One smaller, more delicate. And a third, fainter set, barefoot. I followed the trail down a winding corridor that ended at a small, ivy-covered door, camouflaged against the mansion's outer wall. It was unlocked. Someone had used this passage to escape, unheard and unseen. The locked room was a lie. The real question was no longer how, but who. Who knew this secret path existed? As dawn broke, painting the sky in shades of gray, I gathered them all back in the study. Mr. Hensley was shot at 10:47 p.m., I began, my voice echoing in the dense room. The gun was burned in the fireplace, and the door was locked from the inside. A perfect, impossible crime. Except for one thing. I paused, letting the weight of my words hang in the air. There's a hidden passage behind that wall. Evelyn gasped audibly. Henry's face was a mask of confusion. But Clara, her composure cracked. Just for a second, a flicker of raw panic in her eyes. And I saw it. You married Arthur shortly after his first wife's death, didn't you, Clara? Did you have any idea he was a man who kept secrets? Her eyes welled with tears. He was a monster. He controlled my every move. I wanted to leave, but he threatened to destroy me. I stepped closer, my voice dropping to a low, intense register. So, you destroyed him first. Her act shattered. That's insane, she cried, her voice cracking. The door was locked. Everyone knows it was locked. My tone sharpened like a razor's edge. You didn't leave through the door, Clara. You left through the wall. The room went dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. Clara's lips trembled. I don't know what you're talking about. But I knew she did. Every perfect crime has an imperfect element. And in her case, it was emotion. I laid it all out for them. The whole ugly truth. Clara had discovered the hidden passage months ago. That night, during a heated argument, she shot Arthur. She tossed the revolver into the roaring fire, then slipped into the hidden corridor, using a clever lever mechanism to slide the bookshelf shut from the inside. To anyone breaking in, the room was a sealed tomb. The raging thunderstorm outside provided the perfect cover. Flickering lights, crashing thunder, widespread confusion. It was her one perfect chance to commit an imperfect murder. You can't prove any of that, Henry suddenly shouted, his voice betraying his panic. Oh, but I can, I said, turning my gaze to him. Because you helped her. Henry's face went white. What are you talking about? I smiled grimly. You told me you were outside making a call, but the storm knocked out the signal for miles. You weren't on the phone, Henry. You were waiting by that hidden door, weren't you? Waiting to help her escape. He began to tremble, his composure crumbling. She promised we'd be together. At that, Clara let out a scream of pure fury. You idiot. As officers moved in to take them both away, I just stood there, watching the sordid truth unravel like a scene from a nightmare. The mansion finally fell quiet again. the only sound the rhythmic dripping of rain from a broken gutter. Clara and Henry were gone. I stared into the dying embers of the fire, feeling no sense of victory, just a profound emptiness. The case was solved, the puzzle complete, but something still gnawed at me. The footprints in the passage. There were 3 sets. Who was the third person? As if summoned by my thoughts, Evelyn stepped out of the shadows. Detective, you forgot to mention the footprints. I turned slowly. What about them? A faint, chilling smile touched her lips. There were 3 sets, weren't there? I nodded. Yes. Her voice was soft but carried a cold weight. One of them was mine. The words hung in the air, freezing the blood in my veins. I'm the one who showed Clara the passage. I told her how to use it. Of course, I never dreamed she'd actually go through with it. Her eyes, once full of fear, were now as cold and hard as glass. But now, he's gone, and we're all free. She turned and walked away, her slender form passing an old ornate mirror on the wall. For a split second, her reflection wavered. I saw not a young girl, but the ghostly image of an older woman, wearing a pendant identical to the one Arthur's first wife had been buried in. I blinked, and the illusion was gone. Outside, the storm had finally passed. But inside Hensley Manor, something lingered. Guilt, perhaps. Or ghosts. I knew one thing for certain. The locked room murder was never about the lock on the door. It was about the secrets locked behind it. Weeks later, the manor stood empty, a dark silhouette against the sky. Locals began to whisper tales of flickering lights in the study and faint voices echoing in the halls. I went back one last time, standing on the very spot where Arthur Hensley had taken his last breath. The grand clock on the mantel was still stopped at 10:47. Compelled by an unseen force, I reached out and touched the spine of the art of deception. A soft click echoed from behind the wall, and then a woman's whisper, seeming to come from the very air around me. Detective. I spun around, but there was no one there. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the heart of a mystery. If you enjoy tales of suspense and secrets, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories from the shadows. Stay curious